What's doing, everybody? Welcome to First Class Fatherhood. I'm Alec, and before I hit you with today's interview, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the link in the description so you can listen to all of the interviews I've done with so many tremendous dads, including Dana White, Deion Sanders, Tony Hawk, and so many others. Now let's get going with today's interview. Joining me now, First Class Father Jason Mesnick. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
First class? Nobody's ever said that to me, ever.
Yeah, well, that's what we are here. We're first class fathers.
Okay, I'm just happy to be a dad.
All right. How many kids do you have, and how old are they?
I've got 2 kids. I'm actually home, when you reached out, with my 5-year-old Riley, who's sick today, and then I've got a 14-year-old from my first marriage. Full on into puberty, chasing girls, the whole bit.
Yeah, my oldest is 12. Next month he'll be a teenager, so we're kind of bracing for impact over here ourselves.
That's pretty funny.
What kind of sports or activities are they into?
Let's see. My son, he's all sports. He's kind of narrowed everything down. So he played everything growing up: soccer, baseball, basketball, flag football, not tackle. And then now he just does basketball, and he's starting to get into golf. Daughter is full into gymnastics, does that every week with a group, and she does Girl Scouts, swim lessons. Like she's more of like get out of the house and do stuff kind of girl.
Okay, very cool. Do you get in there and coach at all with the flag football teams and stuff, or do you enjoy it more from the sideline?
A little bit of both. Like, I've coached basketball. I've never been, for him, I was never, the head coach of everything because I was a really crappy athlete. So I helped when he was really little with baseball, coached his baseball teams in Little League, and basketball, but not football. I was definitely not that good at football. It's funny you're asking because we're just getting ready for my daughter to start T-ball for the first time, so I'm going to be one of the coaches there, too. So I'll probably be probably a little bit more involved with her just because I love doing it with him, but I got kind of coached out pretty quick by some other really good coaches. But already, in her world, the dads are you better do this. We need your help.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though, it is definitely a fun experience. I'm the same way. I love to coach at the T-ball level, the first couple of years of the soccer, and then as it gets more competitive and they start learning the actual aspects of the game, I'll step back and then go back to the little ones again.
Yeah, no, my memories of my son are really just trying to teach him how to do jumping jacks. You ever watch kids try to do jumping jacks when they're little?
It's one of those awkward things, yeah.
It's so funny. So my only memories of coaching my son are trying to teach him how to do jumping jacks, and has very little to do with hitting a baseball or shooting a basketball.
Yeah, of course, and also, I look back with different goggles and think that I knew exactly how to do it when I was his age, so.
Yeah, and you think you're the best too. When you're little, oh man, I'm so good. And you're running to third base instead of first base.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Jason, please take a minute here just to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
So what I do, my day job is in real estate. So I help people buy and sell homes in the Seattle area. I've lived here for most of my life, so that's kind of the day job. And luckily, a day like today when my daughter's sick, I can kind of stay in while my wife goes to work and be here until she gets home. Obviously I'm here from randomly. This is my 10-year anniversary from The Bachelor. Can't believe it's been 10 years. So that's why I'm sure you reached out. I'm definitely a dad, but I probably wouldn't have been reached out unless I was on the show. Gosh, I was even a week and a half ago. I was in New York with the new Bachelor. His name's Colton, and it's just amazing how big of a gap there is. He's 26, So when I was on The Bachelor, he was a teenager in high school, and his world now, we're at Good Morning America, and he's around filming everything, and doing Snapchat and Instagram posts and all this stuff. I'm like, what are you doing? Should I be doing that?
Yeah, the game has certainly changed a lot since you were on there with all the different devices now and the screen time and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
How did When did you first become a father, Jason, and how did becoming a dad kind of change your perspective on life?
Well, I became a dad, so obviously my son's 14. I had dated his mom for 5 years, and we got married, and we were married for a couple of years. And she decided to go in another direction, so that's why the marriage ended. But you know, it was pretty quick from when her and I got married. And probably the biggest impact to me is, you know, once we split up, it was, you know, she kind of went through some stuff early on where he was with me, you know, I'd say 80 to 90% of the time for about 3 years, which, you know, as, you know, I wouldn't say I was a single dad, but I was a dad that was with my kid, you know, a lot of the time. It was just a big, you know, I loved every minute of it, especially early on, because I was able to grow this awesome bond with my son Ty. But it was really hard. And I think anybody who's with, you know, share like co-parenting or single parents or whatever you might want to call it, that do that, it's a whole different challenge than kind of the traditional when you've got two parents involved.
Yeah. What were some of the challenges of doing like reality TV shows? You did 2 of them back to back there. What were some of the challenges of doing that while being a dad?
Well, the first one I did, so when it was The Bachelorette, he was definitely not around much for that. So we did a trip out to Seattle, and it was just more of like coordinating, like, you know, my sister-in-law to pick him up from daycare and then meet us at a park. So that was a very small thing. Like, he may have been a part of it for, gosh, I'm going to bet like 5 hours or less total. So that wasn't much of a challenge. But like when it became, you know, the next season when it was The Bachelor, you know, they wanted him to be kind of highlighted. You know, the whole idea back then was to kind of mirror the movie Sleepless in Seattle, if everybody remembers that movie with Tom Hanks.
Of course.
And they really wanted it to look like I was the single dad living on a houseboat. And they tried to get the rights from the movie Sleepless in Seattle, but the movie wouldn't give ABC's production company the rights to do it. So they really faked it. Like they rented a houseboat because I lived in a tiny little house in the Seattle area, which wasn't going to look great for TV. And I think the challenge more than anything was making sure that I was protecting him away from, like, I really wanted people to see him because I thought, you know, he's a great kid. And I knew they picked me basically because, you know, that was my story, that single dad. Which at that point wasn't even really the case. It was shared, you know, I was shared custody with my ex-wife half the time. But, you know, they had all these ideas of, hey, like, when you go on a date, we're going to have all these girls, 25 girls, you know, babysit him. And so they pushed these weird concepts on me, and it was like, you know what, that's not going to happen. You know, I know that seems fun for TV land, but in my real world, like, I would never let 25 strangers that are, you know, 20 to 30 years old, drinking all day long, babysit my son. So I think the challenge really was just protecting what I knew was right from what they wanted to portray on TV.
Yeah, I can understand that. And how did your family kind of, I'm not sure if your parents are still with us, so I apologize if they're not, but how did your family kind of respond to, did they feel a little cautious about you doing this reality TV, it being the fact that you did have a son, and were they worried about him throughout this process?
I don't think so. I mean, they trust me. I mean, my parents know out of, like, they are both alive, and I've got 2 brothers, and, like, my brothers are very much more traditional. They work at big companies, and, you know, they probably wouldn't do, like, for example, people in real estate are, you know, you're basically on your own, and you make a living when you buy and sell home, help your clients buy and sell homes. So my brothers would never do that. They're much more consistent, need more consistency in their life. And, you know, like, right out of college, I was the one kid who, like, I picked up my backpack and traveled around Europe by myself for 3 months. So I think when I came to them, you know, with this whole Bachelor thing, they were like, you know, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be you. And I think they just wanted me to really think it through. And of course, back then, you know, like I was never going on the show just thinking you're going to get married or find your wife, especially on The Bachelorette, because the chances of that are so slim. But I think they trusted me, and, you know, it was more importantly, like, when I needed help, especially when I was on The Bachelor. If it was, we spent 3 weeks filming in New Zealand, and my son was in New Zealand with us, and so they spent time obviously helping take care of him when I was out filming. And there were times where like when we were filming down in California, where it was maybe even less my parents, but like my brother would fly down and babysit my son while I was out filming and doing the Bachelor stuff, and I'd come back late at night, and my son would be like sleeping. He was 3 at the time. He'd just be sleeping in my bed, and my brother would be in the room next door. So it was, my parents were definitely part of it, but it was definitely as a kind of like, I don't even want to say single dad, but just dad who had part-time custody. I had a lot of other people involved, even before The Bachelor. My younger brother, he's 3 years younger, he moved into my house to help take care of my son. So, we'd have two people on staff really, to take care of him.
Yeah, that's awesome to have the support. It does really take a village to raise a child, like you say.
Yeah, totally.
All right, well, you had both experiences. Which was more challenging, which was more enjoyable, The Bachelorette or The Bachelor, the whole thing involved?
I think The Bachelorette, when you're 1 of 25, is just a fun ride. Like, you're there, especially if you end up doing The Bachelor or Bachelorette, if you're a girl, you've probably done the other show. So if you do the first go around, it's just like you're learning how producers make a TV show, and you're on camera and you've got microphones attached to you, and you're kind of a part of like this production process, and you're also, making a bunch of new friends that are kind of going through this whole same experience with you. So outside of wondering if you're going to get a rose or not, the rest of it's really fun, right? You can probably go in a helicopter for the first time and travel around the United States or internationally, and all of it's really fun. But then when you become The Bachelor, it definitely becomes much more of a job where, they're coming to you asking you to do certain things that you wouldn't want to do, or, trying to portray, like my son, trying to get him in situations where, like, it would be great if, like, all the girls were babysitting him, like I mentioned before. So that becomes much more challenging. But at the same time, it's much more rewarding at the end, because especially if you get married and you create a family, that part's much more rewarding. But I wouldn't say it's more fun. When, the idea of, like, when I think about, like I mentioned, I was backpacking around Europe by myself, just being free and not having to worry about anything and traveling when you want. That was much more similar to The Bachelorette, where you're just one of these guys, and, you're sitting by the campfire at night, and you're, roasting marshmallows, barbecuing, drinking beer with some new friends that you've made. Like, you don't have a worry in the world, where The Bachelor is much more of like, you're on a mission. Producers are, I keep on saying producers because, the people who make the show have a job to make an interesting show, and they're always sitting down talking to you, and, 80%, maybe 80 to 90% of your time is in that world versus even being on camera.
Yeah, good stuff. What about, I know your daughter's too young yet, but how much of this does your son know about how you met your wife now, and what age would you be comfortable with him watching both seasons that you were on?
It's funny. He's just, as a 14-year-old, he's just starting to ask now. His friends probably know more than he does. So he was 3, and he has no memory of being on the show. And, at this point in his life, his mom doesn't really want him to be on TV or any of that kind of stuff. She said, now that The Bachelor's over, like, let's just have him out of it. So I think that there's a piece of him that is curious, where he's definitely asked. It's really just been in the last couple of weeks. He's like, I'm going to watch the show. And I'm like, no, he definitely watches as a teenager, worse things on TV than The Bachelor. But he still hasn't seen any of it. Where my daughter, like, she's never seen the show, but, they were nice enough to do a wedding for us on TV. But she's seen the wedding, and especially as a little girl, she wanted to see mommy as a princess, and there's definitely no drama. There's not the same drama at the wedding episodes as there are, the regular episodes. So she's seen that kind of stuff, but she hasn't asked about watching the show. I think, God, I do some of my own just kind of fun social media marketing type stuff, even for work in real estate. And we've pulled some old clips, just even the last couple of weeks from The Bachelor off just, iTunes or YouTube. And it's more of a chuckle of like, you don't even look like that anymore, Daddy. Being 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's got to be, at least it's got to be a great wedding video to have, too, because it's so professionally shot, and you got this great documentation of your wedding day, so that part has to be really great.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you proposed to the woman on The Bachelorette there, and she stopped you. Did having a child, did being a single dad, did that have a lot play into her saying no to that, or do you think it was just not meant to be?
I don't think it was meant to. I mean, like, I know her, I know her now, and, retrospectively, and knowing what happened, like, I don't think she was ever going to be comfortable in the world, with somebody who had a kid. There's definitely a TV production aspect of having two people there on the last day, so it looks like that. But, in my mind, I guess if I could go back and do that again, you don't propose to somebody when you're a single dad after a couple months. But so I think that worked out the way it was supposed to. And I even think the way, fast forward to The Bachelor, it worked out the way it was supposed to. I had proposed to somebody else, and she was great. It just, we dated a couple months afterwards, and it just didn't end up working out. But I would say, luckily, with Molly, we dated for another year afterwards of her flying out to Seattle, getting to know my son, and just doing trips like every week for a year. So it ended up being, even though we weren't in the same town for a while, it ended up being much more of a normal kind of dating relationship versus any of the Bachelor stuff.
Yeah, and it seems crazy now. I guess maybe from The Bachelor and Bachelorette. I mean, kids today they date through the phones. Like, they have all these apps that they're dating, swipe left and swipe up, and it's like it seems like they're simulating that type of style of speed dating and all this stuff, and it's a little confusing. But on screen time, it's definitely a challenge for a lot of dads, especially myself. You have a 14-year-old. How do you kind of monitor or handle screen time and all that stuff, social media with your son?
Well, first of all, I'm the worst, because meaning that I trust a little different with my daughter, but I trust my son that, like, if he gets good grades and gets all of his homework done and isn't, he's still not out and about, like, doing bad things that I know about, that I really trust him to give him free time, right? Especially during the school year. Like, you get home and you do homework and you have dinner, and all of a sudden you want to play Fortnite or, NBA basketball video game. So I really trust him. So I will say that this is a really interesting conversation for me, that I'm probably pretty lenient on it. But it's funny. This is like literally, today's Thursday. This past Saturday, my son says to me, he's like, you spoil us too much. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he said, because I really don't buy, like, I literally probably buy him a pair of shoes every year and maybe a couple video games, like, outside of holidays. Like, I don't buy him a lot of stuff. And he was referring to, like, as much time as I let him have screen time when we started talking about it more. I said, so, if this is what you want, like, I am going to probably be stricter. This is my son telling me this. I'm like, I think you're right. And so he's a kid who's asking for, like, a little bit more discipline. So and I think part of it comes from, he used to play year-round basketball, like on all these traveling programs and whatnot. And he's not doing that anymore. So he had this everyday routine of like I'm home, I, do my homework, I go to practice and, have dinner and then maybe have a little bit of time for myself to play video games. But now he doesn't have that. Like, he only plays for a school basketball team. And he's probably just feeling like he knows he's doing it too much. So realistically, I would say in the last, like, 6 days, it's even changed in our house where, I don't know, screen time's, it's hard because, your kids see you on the screen, right? Even if you're editing like you were telling me, you're editing your podcast. You're on your phone.
And that has become a big challenge for me because I was never on social media, none of that. Now I have to be on it to promote and all that, so it is definitely a challenge for sure.
Yeah, and they see you, and like you could say, well, it's for work and it's I'm doing this, but in their eyes, it's like, well, you're still just you're on your phone. So I think, and I'm not pointing fingers, but like we all are, and so I just think it's a growing challenge that we're going to have to face, and I think as long as I can see my son kind of making sure that he's doing real life stuff with his friends versus just on his headset, playing Xbox with them, which strangely enough he's also asking for, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, it is. And then, we're Catholic, so now we just started Lent. So my 3 boys gave up video games for Lent. So at least but we do use that Fortnite as a form of currency. So it'll be a challenge for us to kind of get them motivated now to do things because they don't have that as a reward. So it's a little tough for both of us here.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's every single person.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Jason, you've had a lot of accomplishments already. You've been on Bachelor, Bachelorette. What kind of goals or what do you have coming up in the future here? What do you have looking forward to?
Well, first of all, a lot of travel's coming up. But outside of that, probably, I'd say 2 things. One is, so I'm 42 now, and somebody was asking me this too, like at New Year's, you're like, what's your resolution? And I don't really have annual resolutions. But the first thing that came to my mind was, I'm probably plus or minus near the halftime of my life, right? Unless something drastic happens. So like maybe I'll if health goes well, I'll live to like my 80s-ish, mid-80s, whatever. So I thought like my only goal when I thought about that was like, can I make the second half of my life better than the first half of my life? So I literally, and this has been over the last couple months of like, okay, so I think about that almost every day now, and it's just really okay. So if I really, I had a good first 42 years, and but what do I do now to make it better for me and my family, and those around me? And that means a whole bunch of different things. So it's work, it's family, it's how I give back to the community. It's all those things. But also, like I think day in and day out, like you doing this podcast, in my day job in real estate, I think about that too. It's one is, who do I really want to draw in, as far as people I can help buy and sell houses. And, interestingly enough, what I realized over the last few years is like some of my most fun, best, interesting clients have all kind of come to me because of the Bachelor stuff. And so now I'm kind of even going through a personal kind of branding and marketing of like, so how do I figure out how to market and brand towards those people? So that's probably more of a short-term thing. Like, I was even shooting videos yesterday of kind of Bachelor world meets real estate world myself. So just an ongoing, like, enjoying more of what I do, and also, like I said, making these next 42 or whatever years, awesome as I can.
Yeah, well said. And it's definitely, the times are definitely changing as far as we do see a lot of celebrities now, instead of modeling somebody else's perfume per se, they're just making their own and doing their own thing on their own Instagram accounts. And so it's becoming more personalized to the brand, like you said there. So there's definitely some big changes and opportunities.
Yeah, well, I mean, even like, in the Bachelor world, there must be, I don't know, I'm probably underestimating 10 to 20 Bachelor contestants that do a podcast it's a very Bachelor related, like, the kids, I say kids because in their mid-20s that are trying to build, a community around them talking about The Bachelor. But Molly and I did that, gosh, I'd say 6 or 7 years ago we had a podcast. And so, like, I totally get it. I wish I could have convinced Molly, my wife, to keep on doing it, but there's all different ways, and all different ways of continuing to brand yourself and build whatever you want to build.
Yeah, definitely. All right, last question I'm going to hit you with here, Jason. I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast, what type of advice do you have for that new father or for that about-to-be father who's out there listening?
Advice. Gosh, I mean, I have two friends that just had their first kids too. Just love every minute. I mean, that's like everything goes so fast. You know, like we have this like little wall of fame of like just the kids growing up in our house. And like I walked by, the first picture is my son like on my shoulders at the zoo, and he's like 2 years old. And like literally he's at 14 now, and like he's a good kid, but he still would much rather if he had 10 things to do, it would be the first 10 would be things with his friends, and I wouldn't even be on the top 10 list. And so it's just enjoy every stinking moment, when they're little. And I have a friend of mine that we joke, when a baby's born, they're much more like a larva. Like they can't do much. They rely, they just kind of lay there, and eventually they learn how to sit up and then roll over on their tummies after tummy time. And I just think like loving every single minute is the best thing, and then, obviously there's the balance of, your relationship with your partner, your wife or husband, and then, building and working and making a living. But like, I would drop anything in my world, like I'm home, with my daughter sick today, and we're just, until we had this scheduled, we were just sitting on the couch. She's actually watching the Flintstones, and I was working. But just love every single minute, because it's the best thing. Like I can guarantee, like, thankfully I'm not on my deathbed or haven't been near it, but like I can guarantee you, you're gonna, at the end of the day, you're gonna be thinking about these moments, and not like what you did for work, or those type of things. You're gonna remember these special moments with your family.
Yeah, very well said. I love the message. This has been an awesome experience for me. I got to say, Jason Mesnick, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time on First Class Fatherhood.
Yeah, no problem, man.